All right, welcome in, guys. Farzine Vasugian here with you for another episode. Yes, we are back. Another episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed the last couple of weeks of no Chiefs Zone podcast, no Red Friday live chat. Enjoying the start to your summer. I believe most people in the United States now enjoying the summertime. Those of you still in school should be out pretty soon. So the start of summer. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying that so far, as the Chiefs have been in the news quite a bit lately with the whole situation involving the state of Kansas trying to lure in the Chiefs. There's some updates on that front. We'll definitely get into that very shortly. Also talk a little bit about the Chiefs OTAs and some news involving Xavier Worthy. He has now signed his deal. Wanted to talk about him a little bit, and also the receiving corps, what that's going to look like in 2024 for the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, far bigger expectations from the wide receivers this year than last year. So we'll get into that. I also want to talk a little bit about CJ Stroud. He was on a podcast very recently and had an interesting comment regarding a couple of quarterbacks that are in the NFL today and just kind of the things that they've dealt with during their careers. So I want to chime in on that as well. Yes, as I said, the Chiefs Zone is back. Appreciate all of you guys who are here watching live on the Facebook and YouTube pages. Big thanks to you guys. Shout outs to you guys. I definitely want to hear from you guys today because we're going to be touching on the whole situation with the state of Kansas and what's going on with them trying to lure in the Chiefs, as there is a bit of an update on that front there. So I'd love to hear from you guys and see what your thoughts are on those things right there, because it's a pretty big deal right now. A lot of people are reacting to that. Definitely want your guys' thoughts on that as we move on with the show. This podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com for your ticketing needs, whether you were to go to Royals baseball game, KC Current, Sporting KC, one of those soccer teams. We obviously now know the NFL schedule, so if you know what Chiefs games you want to go to this year, SeatGeek is the place to go. Go to SeatGeek.com. Pick your tickets, and when you check out, use my promo code Farzine, and you will save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. So go to SeatGeek.com, and at checkout, use my promo code Farzine, and you will save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. All right, let's get right into it. Back from Vegas. I had some fun there. Made a little bit of money. Also visited the stadium that the Chiefs own, nicknamed Arrowhead West, the venue where they won Super Bowl 58. Raiders fans certainly did not appreciate that, but who the hell cares about them? So neither here nor there. Let's get into it now. Kansas rallying to bring in the Kansas City Chiefs. So this came out roughly 24 hours ago. A lot of moving parts here. Nothing major has happened yet, but as far as like getting the wheels turning on bringing the Chiefs to Kansas, we haven't really seen any of that in motion until 24 hours ago, where the state of Kansas, they received strong voter support in bringing in the Chiefs to the state of Kansas. Scoop and Score. I did not receive this text. My dad did, though, and he forwarded this to me. A lot of you guys confirmed that you guys received the same text. I believe depending on where you live in Kansas. So if you live in the Kansas City area, you got a text from a 913 number. If you live in like Topeka, Lawrence, you got the same exact message from like a 785 number. And anywhere west of that, you got a text from a 620 area code number. Those are all in the state of Kansas. And they're essentially, out there trying to get people to show support for the state of Kansas getting the Chiefs to cross the state line border, getting them away from the state of Missouri. There's all this talk about star bonds and what that will do in trying to help Kansas case, the state of Kansas case, in getting the Chiefs. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with star bonds, and I had to do my research on this because I did not know about this either, but when you look at star bonds and what that entails and what that does, essentially what that is, it's the tax money that will be used tax money that's been collected in years past to bring in, do whatever they want to do, essentially. So in this case, they want to build a new stadium for the Kansas City Chiefs, and we don't quite know what that'll be called yet. Could be Arrowhead 2 or something like that, but it would be basically a way to use that money to pay for the stadium. And the rumors out there are that Laura Kelly, the Kansas governor, wants to use Star Bonds to build that stadium and give it to Clark Hunt for full ownership. Now, the one important thing to know about Star Bonds, and this is where we cross, political lines here, it would not raise sales tax in the state of Kansas. And this is where some people are wondering, is that really true? Is there maybe some sort of a backlier where taxes still get raised when this project is ongoing? Those are very valid questions. And I think those are questions that, when they get asked. I know on Pete Mundo's show on KCMO radio, he was kind of bringing that up with one of the, with Ty Masterson, the state Senate president. And he kind of danced around that question. So you don't really get clear answers on those kinds of things. There was also Chris Kobach's former, and let me pull up the name because I want to get the name here, but I believe Chris Kobach's former representative was also on KCMO, and he talked about Patrick Tuhey. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He mentioned how, why are we in an era where we're willing to pay every dollar for a billionaire stadium? And quite honestly, I don't disagree. Unfortunately, that's just the way things work out. You look at the Carolina Panthers. I saw that they have suggestions for stadium renovations that'll cost $800 million, which is exactly what the Chiefs had, an $800 million renovation idea. And the Panthers wanted, I believe, $650 million from taxpayers. Like the Chiefs wanted $500 million from the public. Still, they're asking a lot of money from the public, but the Chiefs, Clark Hunt was willing to put down more money than I guess David Tepper would. David Tepper, excuse me. Ultimately, though, this whole situation with the Star Bonds, that is essentially the big selling point in trying to get the Chiefs to come to Kansas and not have to use taxpayer money. That's essentially what Star Bonds are. Now, in the long run, how is this going to work for the state of Kansas? I think, the biggest selling point is the location. They want it very close to the Legends area. If you live in the Kansas City area, if you've been in the Kansas City area, you're probably familiar with that area. The Kansas Speedway is there. Hollywood Casino is there. Hollywood Casino, kind of a big deal because that is where Barstool Sportsbook is. And that is to my knowledge, and forgive me, I'm not very familiar with casinos in Kansas, but I know that is where that is the only sports book in Kansas City, to my knowledge. Now, maybe it's not as big of a deal anymore because of online gambling being legal in the state of Kansas, but that is something to throw out there because, wouldn't it make sense if people went to, if they had tickets to a Chiefs game at the Legends area, they go to Hollywood Casino first, place a bet, then they head over to the game. I was about to say head over to Arrowhead, but we don't know if it'll be called Arrowhead. Here's my thing. This whole situation, and look, I've said this many times, I'm a Kansas resident, but I don't care where they go ultimately. I just want this to be done right. Because, and I heard Mundo say this on his radio show, that, okay, what is this for? You're going to get 8 or 9 games, home games in the regular season, maybe 1 or 2 in the preseason. We don't know how many preseason and regular season games we will have by 2031. But, give or take, you're going to have 10 home games plus hopefully some playoff games. A lot of them during your time in the state of Kansas, if this move happens. But I have to add to that, because it's not, if you're going to build a brand new stadium, especially if it's going to be an indoor stadium, well, then this has to be a stadium that's going to bring in other events other than just Chiefs games. Obviously, the big one out there would be the Super Bowl. You know, you're going to have an indoor stadium, which is what the NFL either goes to warm weather cities or indoor stadiums now for Super Bowls. The other big thing is a lot of big performers like Taylor Swift, like The Weeknd, and then you see a lot of classic rock bands that are going for another tour. They perform at bigger venues in stadiums rather than arenas. So you want to be able to bring more of those. I'm not saying Arrowhead does not do that today. They absolutely do. Now, I'll be honest, I've never been to a concert at Arrowhead or Kauffman Stadium before. So I don't listen. I will never go to an arena, or a concert at Arrowhead. I cannot imagine in July and August in that sweltering heat just to listen to me. Not to say those musicians are terrible, but I could not do it in that heat. No, thank you. A lot of you guys are, though. A lot of you guys are. Well, I mean, Taylor Swift, she packed the house. I believe Beyonce was at Arrowhead the same night the Chiefs visited the Jets for Sunday Night Football. Yeah, in week 4. I don't know if they packed the house for that one or not. I thought that was kind of, I mean, Arrowhead's obviously got to make their money, but was kind of surprised they did it at the same time as the Chiefs away game. But neither here nor there. Anyway, my point is, if you're going to do that, you got to bring in those big concerts to Arrowhead. You're definitely deserving of having those if you build a brand new stadium. Other sporting events you could bring in, I mentioned the Super Bowl, but what about WrestleMania? They just had one in Philadelphia, and I don't really know. I mean, I'm not that Philadelphia was a bad crowd or anything, but it was outdoors and it was 50 degrees, you know, right around those temperatures. And a lot of those wrestlers are, you know, shirtless and tights. Not really sure if that's ideal weather for pro wrestlers, honestly. Final Fours, I mean, you definitely want to have that in Kansas City. Haven't had that since 1988, Kemper Arena, the last time they came to Kansas City. So this would definitely be a big upgrade. I don't know if the Big 12 tournament would have any interest in doing their games at the new Arrowhead in Kansas. I don't want to dive too much into that right now, but maybe just something to think about. Obviously, you would have other big events. Like you just had the game between International Miami and Sporting Kansas City at Arrowhead because of Lionel Messi and the amount of people that wanted to attend that game to see Messi in person. You would probably draw those kinds of games. I know Sporting Kansas City and Arrowhead, they've had some international soccer games over the years in Kansas City. Maybe this new stadium would be a good venue for that. So there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of things you can do with a new stadium. And if you can make those events happen, this would be a success. In my opinion, that would be worth the money you're putting in and moving, essentially, if you can do it right and get all these other events to your stadium. Let me just say this, because I know there's this big border war online. No, they need to stay in Missouri. No, they need to come to my state, Kansas. And it's like, man, I don't care. Like, this doesn't change my life at the end of the day. I will say this. I do think it is time for the Chiefs to get a new stadium and leave the Truman Sports Complex. Man, the Truman Sports Complex, like, the parking lot is great. And I really hope the Chiefs can find a way to have a big parking lot wherever they go, and same with the Royals wherever they go. But it is time to leave the Truman Sports Complex. It is literally in the middle of nowhere. Literally the middle of like, you're just driving on 435 or I-70, depending which direction you're coming from, and it's just randomly there. And listen, maybe that kind of thing worked maybe in the 70s at the time, but now, you know, with a lot of these stadiums close to downtown venues, or not downtown venues, but the downtown scene essentially is what I'm trying to say. I think that is something important. By the way, I see a lot of you guys questions. If you guys have questions, we haven't done a podcast in a couple of weeks, so let me know if you guys have any questions on the stadiums, on the team, whatever it is. We'll definitely talk some Chiefs football, actual football in a moment, but definitely got to touch on this because this is pretty important here. At the end of the day, I mean, the state of Kansas is working pretty aggressively to get the Chiefs. Meanwhile, my biggest question is, what the hell is the state of Missouri doing? Because ever since that failed April 2nd vote, Missouri's been extremely quiet on this whole thing. I know the mayor of Kansas City, Quentin Lucas, he did say a couple of days after the vote that he did meet with John Sherman. I don't think he said anything publicly about meeting with the Chiefs. So I'm not quite sure what is going to happen on that front there. Because like I said, I mean, the Chiefs have been very quiet. Like the Royals for a couple of years now, they've been very loud and vocal about what they want to do. Whereas the Chiefs, all they ever proposed was just stadium renovations. And obviously, that got turned down. So Clarkon did say on draft weekend, in a press conference, I believe it was on a Saturday or a Sunday, the same weekend, the same day where they announced that Tamba Hali would be going into the Chiefs Hall of Fame and Ring of Honor. Clarkon did say that they need to get the wheels turning on this pretty quickly because there's not a lot of time left. And he's right. We are in June of 2024. And you got to decide at the latest by mid 2025, essentially 12 months from now, you have to make a decision on what you're going to do because building a stadium is going to take some time. I believe the Raider Stadium at Allegiant in Vegas, that took, I want to say 3.5 or 4 years to build. Don't quote me on that, but I'm almost certain it's around that time frame there. I don't know how long SoFi took to build. And that's my next point, too, because I just mentioned Allegiant Stadium and SoFi Stadium. If you're the Chiefs, you go and visit your division rivals every year. And 2 of those 3 rivals have brand new stadiums, state-of-the-art stadiums. I mean, there are a lot of great things I've heard about SoFi Stadium. I've never been to SoFi, but I've heard nothing but great things about it. I've been to Allegiant Stadium a couple of times, and it is a great stadium. I will listen for all the shots I like to take at the Raiders. I will say right now, the Raiders definitely have the edge on the Chiefs when it comes to their stadium. The Chiefs just obviously won Super Bowl 58 in Vegas, and they spent an entire week using the Raiders practice facilities. So this is an opportunity. I mean, hopefully the Chiefs took full advantage of this during their time in Vegas for Super Bowl 58. You need to get all the information you can to learn from those things. Listen, we are in a copycat world. Okay, I know this gets brought up in the NFL a lot, where teams copy other teams' offensive play calls and whatnot. But that's really how life works as well. If there's a business model that's working for one company, well, that rival company needs to copy it and do it better. That's exactly what the Chiefs should be doing. You know what your 2 division rivals, what works for their stadiums. Obviously, there are a lot of other stadiums out there too. I mean, Arizona, their stadium's been used multiple times for Super Bowls in the past. The Chiefs played in Super Bowl 57, as a matter of fact, they won that one. You've also got Minnesota. The Chiefs were there recently for a game. You have Atlanta. I don't think the Chiefs are going to Atlanta for a game, but they've got a brand new stadium. A lot of positive things coming out from that stadium as well. So it's got to be done right. That's the one thing. I don't care if you're in Lee Summit, Missouri, or if you go further out west to, I don't know, man, what's the city between Lawrence and Kansas City? I'm drawing a blank right now. Boy, I can't even think of it. Baker. I mean, I don't know. Like, wherever you go, make it. Now, if you go to Baker, that'd be a little weird, but you get the idea. Do it right. As long as it's in the Kansas City metro area. I'm being facetious, by the way, when I say Baker. No offense to anyone in Baker. But it's got to be in the Kansas City area, and you got to do it right. I know there may not be a lot of spots. I know a lot of people keep talking about Johnson County, and I just don't know where you'd go unless you go way further south in Overland Park. But then you'd be kind of closer to Lewisburg than you would to Kansas City. And no disrespect to Lewisburg, but it's not really ideal for a pro football team stadium, at least in the Kansas City area. Maybe it would work in a place like Green Bay, but definitely not in Kansas City. So I'm very curious to know what you guys think about all of it. Sean says DeSoto. Yeah, DeSoto. There was one city so close to Lawrence. I'm drawing a blank on it. What is the name of that city? I gotta look it up real quickly. Eudora. That was the city I was thinking of. That is the small town that's very close. Tonganoxie. I mean, I made a joke several weeks ago when the vote failed. I said that I can't wait for the Osawatomie Chiefs to win a Super Bowl in 2031. It felt like the entire city of Osawatomie commented on that post talking about how much they love that idea. So we'll see what they do there. Eudora, yeah, that's what I was thinking of, Ryan. Thank you. Timothy says, funny, in 97, 98, nobody called the Chiefs Jack County taxpayers when we voted to upgrade both stadiums. Now the Chiefs want to leave, and this was their way out and to look like the victim. I mean, I don't know about the victim part, Timothy. Let me say this, though. I mean, you bring up 97, 98. It's just a different time now. At the time, you didn't see so many of these indoor stadiums, and now you do. I think a third of NFL stadiums are played indoors now, if I'm not mistaken. So we are kind of in a different time now where you see what's working for other teams and other venues. And again, like Arrowhead, I get it. The Truman Sports Club, a lot of memories. Like I saw a lot of people online say, well, what about the traditions and the memories of the Truman Sports? I get it, man. Like I see those tweets and I think of my parents taking my brother and I to Chiefs games and Royals games over the years. But all good things must come to an end. And we are kind of at a point right now where the Chiefs definitely need a new stadium. I think the grounds crew, fantastic. They do a great job with the field, even in some of the more difficult conditions that they've dealt with in years past, such as the playoff game and the wild card round against the Dolphins. Field was, as good as it could have been in those situations. And you want to make sure that they're able to do the same thing when they go to an indoor stadium, possibly. So definitely something. So those things you got to consider as well. But it is time, man. Like if any of you have gone to like Allegiant Stadium or maybe even SoFi Stadium, not that I've been to SoFi, but you just walk around those stadiums, and I've seen clips, pictures and videos online, and you walk around Arrowhead, man, you do notice a wild difference. Just in the structure, just the modernization of the stadium as well. Like it is time to get a modern stadium if you're Kansas City, I think, because not only does the team, the fan base deserve that, you also have to bring in those major events. I think Kansas City is very deserving of those opportunities. Yeah, the architect for SoFi in Vegas, in Kansas City, I think Populous is what it's called, Jared, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Mike, this is a good one. I forgot to mention this, college football playoff games in Kansas City. That'd be great. I believe SoFi Stadium has had at least one of those or is scheduled to have one. So yeah, that's a good call. I forgot about that. Tor says, I would not trust anything coming out of Kobach's mouth. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so listen, I think, a lot of my followers, not to say that I've influenced you guys to feel a certain way, but I think a lot of you guys have kind of agreed with me that, it doesn't matter ultimately where they go, as long as it's in the metro area and they do it right. I think that's what a lot of people want. Listen, I've heard for years people say, oh, if the Chiefs ever move the Kansas, I'll never cheer for them. Really? Like, especially with the run that they're on right now. I mean, they're not going to win Super Bowls every single year until they move to Kansas. No, if they move to Kansas. But this team, as long as they have Patrick Mahomes, which is going to be a very long time, if this team continues to perform at the level they're performing, you're not going to all of a sudden, turn your back on this team. You're just not. But seriously, who are you going to cheer for? The Raiders? Come on. No one's going to not be a fan of the Chiefs. The Raiders, I mean, I just mentioned the Raiders. They moved, like 10 hours away? I mean, more than that, actually, from Oakland to Vegas, and their fan base is still intact. So if they can do it, so can Chiefs fans. Let's see here. Yeah, I mentioned WrestleMania. WrestleMania would be really cool, man. I would love to see a WrestleMania in Kansas City for sure. That is, you got to start. You got to consider bringing in those major events. I know that they went to SoFi recently last year. They're going to Allegiant next year. So yeah, WWE definitely likes going to newer stadiums for sure. By the way, the state of Missouri, one of their representatives, I think a Democrat from Kansas City, not that it matters what his affiliation is for this topic here, but he has spoke up. He actually did an interview with KCTV5, and I'm trying to pull up his name, Mark Sharp, representative from the state of Missouri in Kansas City, saying that, we can't just really sit around. We got to start doing something. Even acknowledges that Kansas is being aggressive. Word for word says we have to be as aggressive as the Kansas legislature is currently. And by the way, one important thing I did leave out here is the state of Kansas is set to meet with the Chiefs. I believe June 18th is that date. It's going to be in mid-June, but they're inviting Clark Hunt to speak at that, and they basically want to hear each other out and toss ideas around and see what they want to do, what's gonna make everyone happy. Because that rendering that was released a few weeks ago, one thing I didn't even realize at the time that I actually thought of today, there was no practice facility there. Now, again, let's use Allegiant Stadium as an example. You have the stadium near the strip, but the practice facility is in a completely different location. Is that something the Chiefs want? I mean, that's not the Chiefs, their practice facility could be anywhere, but it is beneficial to have it right by your stadium for many reasons. So I think that would be nice to have if you're the Chiefs. For instance, I know like Mitch Holthus had the Sunday, or what was it, Saturday rally on draft weekend. Well, he probably went to his office at the practice facility. Then he and his crew and all the Arrowhead employees that needed to be there, you're not really driving anywhere. It's just a short drive from the practice facility to the stadium. It's in the same complex, the same campus, essentially. So I think it would be beneficial for the practice facility and the offices to all be within the same area for sure. So that's something I failed to mention earlier. I'll read a few other comments about this. Jimmy said, I remember in 1990 going to the Who concert in May. It was an awesome experience, and yes, was warm. Still a fun night at the Chiefs Stadium. Yeah, I was mentioning that. I appreciate you mentioning that, Jimmy. Yeah, that's one thing too. Like, I'm sure all these concerts that people have gone to Arrowhead over the years have had a damn great time. Maybe the experience would be a little more enjoyable if it was at an indoor stadium away from the sweltering heat. I mean, let's be honest. Like, no one wants to sit in that kind of heat, in the humidity, for 2 hours to see a concert outdoors. Robert says Missouri fan won't support Kansas football. Wait and see when Chiefs start to lose. Robert, I don't know if autocorrect got you on this comment there, but I think what you're trying to say is you support the Chiefs if they move. I don't know, man. I don't believe you. The Chiefs still at a very high level. Seriously, who are you going to root for? Are you going to go root for the Raiders? Are you going to root for the Broncos? Like, who's your football team going to be? They're just moving 20 minutes away. I don't see like what the uproar is over the move. Like, they're still in the Kansas City area. Let me ask this. For anyone that lives in Missouri, do you refuse to eat Joe's Kansas City barbecue because it's in Kansas? All 3 locations are in Kansas? No, that's silly. Do you not go to the Legends area ever because it's in the state of Kansas? I mean, listen, I know there are more things on the Missouri side than there are on the Kansas side, but I mean, come on. Like, I've never understood this Kansas versus Missouri thing. I never have. I'm sorry. Like, I think it's stupid. I really do. There are a lot of spots on the Kansas side that I love. There are a lot of spots on the Missouri side I love going to. I don't know. That's just me. Timothy says they just held WrestleMania outside in Philadelphia. Even Triple H talked about how cold it was the first night. Yeah, the first night. And I remember that. I don't know, man. Like, I was actually surprised the wrestlers were, some of them were shirtless. I mean, obviously some of them have specific outfits they wear and whatnot, but I could not imagine. And listen, you see football players wearing those big coats when even like for 40-degree weather just to stay warm. 40, 50-degree weather. So listen, basketball players, they obviously play indoors in arenas, and they're putting on those sweatshirts whenever they go to the bench. Robert's asking, what about a bridge or walkway over the Missouri River with venues parking on both sides with a stadium on a side of state that pays for it? I think that would be, there's a specific name for that district. What is that called? West Bottoms, I think, is that area. I don't know if that's really a good place. That's where Kemper Arena, I mean, now they call it Hy-Vee Arena or whatever it's called now. Man, a lot of you guys have a lot to say about this. Ryan says, other than the Truman Sports Complex, does Kansas City, Missouri have another location to build a new stadium that would be as attractive as the Legends in Kansas City? This is a really good question, and I think this is what the Royals wanted to do with their downtown move, because we've heard this idea of a downtown stadium for years, and I've always asked, like, where are you going downtown? I just don't know, like, specifically where downtown would things work. I'm looking at my map right now on my iPhone. I mean, I'm just looking around in the area. I really don't see. I know a lot of people talked about the Kansas City Star Pavilion, tearing that down, but I don't think that is enough. I mean, you still have a lot of businesses there that, I mean, they weren't really willing to move, and they claim that the Royals were not in communication with them when the Royals claimed otherwise. So I don't really know, to answer your question, Ryan, where exactly would they go in the downtown area as far as Kansas City as a whole? Yeah, I mean, I think there are some places you could work with. But I just don't know, like, area wise, would it be as enticing as a place like the Legends? I would have to do more research on that. I would have to look around, but I'm not exactly sure. Oh, you were there when Owen Hart died? Oddly enough, they did not show his entrance live. They were like showing a promo, and then they were like cutting to the announcers. They're like, hey, you got to announce this right now. I've heard Jim Ross's interview on that over the years. So yeah, that's crazy you were there. What was the name of that pay-per-view? It wasn't like a traditional pay-per-view. It was like a unique one, like a one-time event there. Timothy says Kansas has claimed for years that they fund the Chiefs when it's always just been in Jackson. Oh, listen, like, anyone in Kansas that says that that says things like that, I mean, I think that's silly. The stadium is in Missouri, and Jackson County pays for it. I've always said that, but you have a strong contingency of fans from both sides. Like I said, I just think the silliness with this debate or battle, whatever you want to call it, I'm sorry. I don't even know, like, why that's even worth arguing over with some people. Kansas can afford the new stadium. Plus, everyone thinks KC is in Kansas anyway. You know, it's funny, Roger. I said this when the vote failed, because it made national headlines that the Kansas City Chiefs might go to Kansas. There are a lot of people that were like, wait, they're not in Kansas? Like, I just realized how confusing that story probably is for a lot of non-Kansas City residents. Over the Edge, that's what it was called. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that's what it was called. Yeah, I remember that. Backlash. Yeah, they did have a backlash in Kansas City. I don't remember what year it was, but it was on Owen Hart. It was the same pay-per-view as Owen Hart's death. Did you know Ellie Kemper from The Office? Her family owned Kemperina. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of The Office. I'm sorry, it's just not appeal. I watched one episode and just didn't like it, but that is pretty cool. I did not know that, Robert. So fun facts with Robert Blumberg here on the Chief Zone podcast. Very cool to know. Yeah, you guys had a lot of comments on this. I appreciate this. Again, my thing, I don't care where they go. Just do it right. That's the big thing here. I'll read some other comments that are not related to the whole Kansas Missouri Stadium thing. Steve says, is the Sky Moore trade to Dallas for real? It's the first I've heard of it. If it is, you're the one breaking the news to me. I don't believe so. Maybe you're just messing with me to tell me that, but I don't believe. I mean, what is Dallas or any team going to give up for Sky Moore? Like, listen, I was a huge fan of Sky Moore coming out of college and thought that he would be able to do some good things. His progression has taken a very long time. I mean, just a very long time. I would, as hard as it is to say, I would rather trust Kadarius Toney over Sky Moore. At least Kadarius Toney has some skill set you can go off of. Rashee Rice, he is possibly facing a lengthy suspension, but he was drafted in the same round a year later and has picked up the offense much faster. What's up, Brad? Loma Linda. Shout out to Loma Linda. Appreciate it. I think I missed another comment here. Robert says, not ready for summer to be over. I'm ready for September. See, that's how I am. Like, I miss football as much as anyone else. But then there's like a part of me that's like, okay, because here's my thing. If you're like me, I used to only watch the NFL, but over the last few years, I've tried to watch more college football as well. So I do like block out a good part of my Saturday and of course Sunday with the Chiefs, majority of their games on Sunday, just to watch football, man. So whenever the Super Bowl happens and the season ends, I decompress on Sundays, man. I'm watching, I'm trying to clear out my list of movies and shows I need to watch. Like, that's what I do in the off season, because I don't really have time for movies and shows during football season. I just don't, because like as soon as college and the NFL season starts, I'm football all the way. Like Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, like it's all football for me. I don't do hardly anything other than just football. So I do agree with you. Like, yeah, that's the little internal conflict there. Trying to enjoy the off season while we can. Triple H and Hogan at Backlash. I do remember that I was not a wrestling fan at the time. The last wrestling event I went to was 2009 when Randy Orton handcuffed Triple H. That was when Randy Orton was with Legacy. Orton handcuffed Triple H to the ropes and then did a DDT on Stephanie McMahon and then gave her a kiss while she was knocked out. Obviously, it's fake, but you got the idea. Funny enough, that's like the most viewed video on WWE's YouTube page. And then after that, I went to WWE Raw recently when it was essentially the Patrick Mahomes show for the entire first hour. Jimmy says, after really thinking about it, if they stay someplace in Missouri or not, they must have enough outside parking to barbecue and other beer. The outside experience is big in Kansas City. Yeah, I get that. And that's something to consider, because if you do have an indoor stadium that does not have a retractable roof, or at least it's not a clear roof, you lose the flyover. That is a huge tradition at Arrowhead, 100%. So I think, with all of this, if you really want a new stadium, you might lose some things at the end of the day. And that flyover might be one of them. That's why I was saying all along, if the Chiefs want an indoor stadium, make it a retractable roof, because that flyover, I mean, that's a big, like me personally, going to Chiefs games, I always wanted to go like at least 10, 15 minutes early to catch all the pregame hoopla as well as the flyover. Like, I remember going to games and obviously the national anthem, home of the Chiefs, like everyone, all 70 plus thousand people, in unison saying that, and then the flyover happening. And I remember, seeing people who would come into their seats late. And listen, I get it. Life happens. Maybe they were caught up doing whatever. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, you missed a flyover. Like, that's a big part of Arrowhead, 100%. Nicholas says it's just a bad look. As I said in my post to you yesterday, Clark spent a crapload of money to build himself a mini mansion at Arrowhead, but won't throw a dime of his billions into his venture. If the Chiefs want to move around the KC area, I don't care, but don't throw it to a vote. And then when it doesn't go your way, make a move that would seems to be vindictive. I don't really disagree with what you're saying, Nicholas, but if you're Clark Hunt and the state of Kansas is willing, this is a rumor, nothing confirmed, but the state of Kansas is willing to give you this stadium full ownership for free, I don't think Clark Hunt's saying no. I don't think any NFL owner would say no to something like that. And you're staying in the Kansas City area, which would be huge. Listen, Nicholas, like you, me, and a lot of Americans can sit here right now and argue about billionaire owners not paying for their stadiums. We could have that discussion forever. But I just mentioned with David Tepper, the owner of the Carolina Panthers, and what he's doing, the amount of money he wants from public funding for renovations for a Panther Stadium. He wants more from the public than Clark Hunt was willing. Still, they're asking a lot of money from the public, but it's kind of how things work at the end of the day. Not that I agree with it, but that's just the way it is. Cole says Sky Moore a broken PlayStation 1 controller. Hey, man, I still have my PlayStation 2. And the controller is not the best, but I still use that. I still enjoy those old PS1 RPGs that you can play on the PS2. What do you think will happen with CeeDee Lamb and Chase and Cincy? This is a really good question from Samuel. What are the logical Raiders fans you'll find on this Facebook page? I think CeeDee Lamb will stay in Dallas. I think they're going to pay him a lot of money. Listen, you need him. Dak Prescott needs him. I don't know about Dak Prescott's future. I think you got to seriously consider moving on at some point. As far as Chase and Cincy, Cincinnati is not in a very good position right now. You have Jamar Chase that wants a lot of money. You have T. Higgins who wants a lot of money. You also have your star pass rusher, Trey Hendrickson, that wants top dollar at his position. You overpaid for Orlando Brown. He's terrible. Bengals fans refuse to hear Chiefs fans out on that, but now even they have kind of come around like, oh yeah, Chiefs fans were right. You overpaid for Joe Burrow. Like Joe Burrow is great when he's available. I've heard Bengals fans brag about how, whenever Burrow's healthy, the Bengals reach the AFC title game at the very least. But you have to add that provision in there that when he's healthy. Availability is the best ability, man. Like you could be a very talented player at your position, but if you're not available, what does it mean at the end of the day? Absolutely nothing. I mean, Gronk was hurt so much. And listen, don't get me wrong, Gronk was great, had a lot of great years in New England and also a little bit in Tampa, but the Patriots were able to still win without him. And I've said over time, like, I don't think Gronk played a vital role in New England's success. Yes, he was a big part of it, but he was not a necessary piece. The Patriots had their big come from behind Super Bowl win against the Falcons without Gronk. I mean, they did a lot of things before Gronk and without him when he was hurt. I went off track there, but man, Cincinnati's in a bad spot. Like you overpaid some guys there, and you have to now try to secure 2 wide receivers and your star pass rusher. Like that's not good. I don't care that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are not attending OTAs. Like that does not mean shit. Like those two do not need OTAs. It does concern me that they're not willing to go to OTAs because they both want big deals. If you only had one wide receiver that was asking for this, it'd be much more simpler. But with two very good wide receivers and a star pass rusher, man, you better hit a massive home run in the next draft. Because, and I know they have the 5th-year option with Chase and all, unless that's already been used. But man, that's they've got a lot to figure out. They've got a lot to figure out for sure. Like Justin Jefferson just got a big deal. By the way, I need to mention this because Tyreek Hill was asked about his contract situation. He said he's letting his agent Drew Rosenhaus handle all of that, and then was asked about Justin Jefferson and his new deal, and he gave a really interesting answer and ended it with it talked about how he wants to help Miami, and then he says that being greedy doesn't help the team. Really? Like, wait a minute. This is coming from Tyreek Hill, the same Tyreek Hill that essentially wanted out of Kansas City because they weren't willing to give him the deal that he wanted. The same Tyreek Hill that got the deal that he wanted and had to watch his former team win 2 Super Bowls without him in both years. That this is the Tyreek Hill that's talking about greed. Okay. All right. Like, how about it? How about it, Tyreek Hill? I don't know what it is with Tyreek Hill, man. Like, Super Bowl week, he was asked about, if he wishes he was still with the team, and he kind of gave he was stuttering with that answer. And listen, I think I would too. Like, you trade me and my former team is winning Super Bowls without me, plural, Super Bowls without me. Everybody talked about how the Chiefs would fail without Tyreek Hill. I mean, the offense was bad last year, but they still found a way. I say bad, but bad by their standard. I mean, they had more drops in the NFL than any team has that ever. But you get the idea. And then he talks about Isaiah Pacheco, how he got number 10 and he felt disrespected. It's like, dude, you got your money. Move on. And listen, he's in a very interesting place in his life. Not that this is any of our business, but he has a shit ton of kids. So, listen, if I was in Tyreek Hill's shoes, and I believe he and his wife are expecting, so I believe that's going to be 11 kids for Tyreek Hill. If I'm Tyreek Hill, man, I do not give a shit about winning a Super Bowl ever again. I need every dollar possible, okay? I don't have kids personally, but I have friends who do, and, they've told me how expensive kids are. You got to make them happy. You got to send them to school. Got to send them to college. I mean, in 6 months, the clothes you buy them, they grow out of that. Like, I've heard a lot of stories about that stuff. Okay. Yeah. Timothy says Hill's got to pay for those 13 kids. Yeah, I agree. Like, again, if I was in his shoes, I would be more concerned about the money than championships. Like, dude, you already have one championship, okay? You're playing well. You're going to go to the Hall of Fame, 1,000%. You got to worry about your personal life. And maybe invest some of that money on some damn condoms, too, while you're at it. John says, I agree. The Tyreek statement was ignorant and exactly what he did. Yeah, there's a term for that. How has his wife not left? Oh, boy, Chris. Now we're crossing serious personal territory here. Listen, man, I dated someone with a kid once. It's an experience for sure. It's not easy. Marrying someone that's had 10 kids, that's a choice. But I guess money is very enticing these days. I don't know. Okay, we got to move on. I thought I want to talk about Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy signed his rookie contract, so the Chiefs have signed all 7 draft picks. Xavier Worthy, some people a little concerned lately because he is dealing with a hamstring injury and is not practicing at OTAs. Now, I want to be very clear about something because OTAs are happening right now, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So they have another 3-day window they're doing. The media is only present for the last of those 3 days. So 2 weeks ago, they had a 3-day window. The media was only available for the 3rd day. Last week, the Chiefs had a 3-day OTA period. The media was only available for the 3rd day. Same thing this week. I know the media, the Chiefs do have players who are going to have be doing media availability. So we'll see what happens there. But we don't know if Xavier Worthy is practicing or not. I know the Chiefs have been putting out content on their social media showing highlights of Hollywood Brown making a catch and all that stuff. We haven't seen Xavier Worthy so far. He may be practicing, he may not. We don't know. Did not practice the first set of OTAs nor the second. Let's see if he's going to be available this weekend and then for mandatory minicamp. I know Chris Jones, he's been at OTAs, but not for all of them. Same with Travis Kelce, which is totally fine because those guys honestly don't need OTAs. And quite honestly, I would rather those guys be limited with OTAs, being veterans in their 30s, big contracts that they both recently signed. Yeah, let's keep them healthy and make sure we're paying them every dollar possible and making sure it's all worth it while being available. I've got no problem with Kelce and Jones not participating in all of the OTAs 100%. In fact, I would be in favor of, some of these, and I know they do vet off days and whatnot, but I think you maybe need to consider more of that with Kelce and Jones. Maybe Mahomes also, just to not risk injury, because those are your core guys that you absolutely need this season. I know everybody, including me, wanted Kelce to get those 16 yards so badly. I also wanted Pacheco to get his 1,000 yards rushing. But that Week 18 game where the Chiefs rested all of their starters except for Chris Jones because he had an incentive he really wanted, I think that was the best thing Kansas City could have done. Yeah, Kelce missed out on a big milestone there and could have joined rare company of players who've had 8 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. But guess what the payoff was? A massive Super Bowl run going back to back. So, yeah, and see, Robert brings this up too. The bye week in Week 6. This is the earliest we've had a bye week in the Patrick Mahomes era. Now, you do have that nice little 10, maybe 11-day window because we don't know the Week 18 schedule yet between Christmas to the first weekend of January. So that is kind of like a mini bye week there. Obviously, that is going to be Kansas City's version of a Thursday night football this year. They're not scheduled to play on Thursday night other than the Week 1 game. So Kansas City, if they can wrap up the bye week, the playoff bye, going into the final week of the regular season, that's going to be a very significant amount of time off for the players. That is a little concerning, but I think I would the Chiefs did have I think it was 2020 where their players didn't play in Week 17. They didn't play during the wild card round because they had the number 1 seed, and their players were off for 2 weeks, and they were just fine when they came back. So I trust the Chiefs will handle that the best they can. Nick says the KCK Chiefs. Yeah, it'd be less confusing for the non-Kansas City residents that don't know the Chiefs play in Missouri. Some do, some don't. I know Tony Gonzalez was like very dedicated to all of these things over the years, even though he never really needed that stuff, but he always showed up to that. When do they do the drop to 53? That is going to be mid to late August, essentially like after the last preseason game. Oh, this is a really good question from Timothy. Lamar Jackson refusing to do OTAs. Do you think he's throwing in the towel? Tom Brady. I've always wondered, because for the longest time, it felt like we've never heard of a quarterback not showing up to OTAs. And I remember Tom Brady did not participate in OTAs. Now, in typical Bill Belichick fashion, he deflected all of the questions about Brady because, as every team does, the non-written rule is you do not talk about players who are not at OTAs. So I remember Andy Reid was asked a lot about the same offseason where Justin Houston, Marcus Peters, and Eric Berry did not attend OTAs. And Andy Reid was having to push back on a lot of those questions. But Lamar Jackson, Listen, Lamar, the Ravens maybe have the best one-dimensional offense in the NFL. But a one-dimensional offense is not going to take you to a Super Bowl. And listen, I think the running game is going to be even better with Derrick Henry. They're already the best in the NFL. And I'm a huge fan of Derrick Henry. So I think that's great for Baltimore. But you got to be better. And listen, I'll give credit to Lamar Jackson because he has done a lot of things over time that people thought he would have had a limited career, me included. And he's still doing a lot of big things. But when it comes to the playoffs, Lamar Jackson's track record is not very good. I mean, I had the same criticism with Kadarius Toney, who has yet to be seen in OTAs. Like, if there's anyone on this team that needs OTAs, it's Kadarius Toney. If there's any quarterback out there that needs OTAs, it's Lamar Jackson, because you've got a great team in Baltimore, but a very one-dimensional offense that has limitations. Now, again, it's voluntary, but is it really voluntary? Like, I don't know. Like, if you're as young as Lamar Jackson, it's not a good look. If you're Travis Kelce, if you're Chris Jones like last year, like, you don't need OTAs. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson, they don't need OTAs. But Lamar Jackson, that guy has to be there 100%. There's more Tyreek Hill commentary on in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and move on from those. I do want to get back to the wide receivers here with Xavier Worthy, because I think we need to have a discussion about the wide receiver group this year. A year ago today, what did the wide receiver room look like? The top three receivers were Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore. Those are no longer your top three receivers. Your top three receivers today are Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, and pending a suspension, Rashee Rice. A far different set of receivers. Listen, there's a lot of speculation that Rice will not face a suspension for 2024, and it will come in 2025 because the trial is going to take some time. If that's the case, you got three very good receivers to start off the season with. And a guy like Xavier Worthy doesn't have a lot of pressure to step up early on. Hollywood Brown's a veteran, so there's a lot that's expected from him, and I think he's going to thrive from the get-go, especially against his former team to start off the season. You know he'll be motivated for that. But as far as let's say Rashee Rice does face a half-season suspension to start off 2024. Well, there is a little bit of pressure on Xavier Worthy, but you still have Hollywood Brown, you still have Travis Kelce, you have Noah Gray, who I think is an underrated number 2 tight end, and maybe they utilize more of the other tight ends like Jared Wiley, who they just drafted and is getting a lot of hype, and Irv Smith Jr. Or is it junior or senior? I don't know. I think it's junior. So I think you'll see some of that. And then when Rice comes back from his 6 or 8 game suspension, he'll be fresh and ready to go. And that'll give the offense a very nice midseason boost that it can use. So whether Rice is available or not, I still think there are positives from that with this Chiefs team for 2024. And again, I think it's very important to utilize key rest days in training camp for these veterans, especially Kelce, because we saw what resting him in week 18 did. Because we knew the Chiefs were not going to have a the number one seed bye in the playoffs. They had to play on wild card weekend. And I think Kelce did some good things in that game. He drew a lot of attention from defenders in that game that allowed Rice to thrive. The following week against Buffalo, he balled out 2 touchdowns. Against the Ravens, played even better. In the Super Bowl against the 49ers, a very quiet first half. The only thing people remember from that first half with Kelce was him and Andy Reid. That's a little scuffle on the sidelines. But in the second half, Travis Kelce, 90-plus yards in the second half and overtime. Had a huge catch with less than a minute to go before the end of regulation. So I really like the way this receiving core is looking. and then you add in Travis Kelce, he's obviously still part of the team. Patrick Mahomes, his pass catchers in 2024, far better than what you had a year ago. Because a year ago, I mentioned you had Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore as your top three receivers, with the hope that maybe DeAndre Hopkins was going to join. Obviously, that did not end up being the case. I think DeAndre Hopkins, he waited out for as long as he could, but the Chiefs were in a bind with the salary cap, so he had to move on to another team, and he picked Tennessee. So you're in a much better spot with the receiver room today than you were 12 months ago. Now, you have Kadarius Toney on the team still. You have Sky Moore, and you're hoping. Oh, by the way, another player I should mention is Justin Ross. You're hoping one of those three, Justin Ross, KT, or Sky Moore, with the potential that they have, the reasons that they were brought in, that they would maybe step it up and help add a lot of value to the depth with the wide receiver room. Me personally, I'm not holding my breath on that. If I had to make one of those three, who would I trust the most? Crazy enough, I would pick Kadarius Toney. I know that guy had a horrible season last year, but maybe there's a reason why the Chiefs have not given up on him. Yeah, he's dealt with a lot of injuries. Yeah, last year was an atrocious year with the drops with KT, but he's still here, and there's a reason for that. I will say this, I kind of would rather take a chance at Mecole Hardman. And I know that's easy to say emotionally because he caught that game-winning pass in overtime to win the Super Bowl. But he does have this great skill set. But I think of this right now. Why is Mecole Hardman still available? I mean, he's got a great skill set. The dude is really fast. He's not Tyreek Hill fast, but he's one of the faster players in the NFL right now. I don't know what the deal is. Part of me wondered today, maybe that comment he made about the Jets in a podcast or whatever it was, maybe that's put him in a very bad position where teams are not willing to sign him. I don't know. I could be completely wrong, but a guy like Mecole Hardman with his skill set should be on an NFL team right now. Robert mentions Nico Remigio. I thought Nico Remigio did some good things in the preseason last year, but I don't know if I put him in the same category as KT or Justin Ross, guys who have the potential. I know Justin Ross is supposed to be a really good receiver, but we're not seeing that yet. And the word we got last year from Albert Breer was that he's struggling to pick up the offense in practice. So I don't know. I think the jury's still out on those guys right there. The Chiefs are going to have some interesting decisions to make. They want the right 6, 7, or 8 receivers because if we know Patrick Mahomes is very good at distributing the football, not just to Kelce. Even when Kelce and Hill were on the team together, Mahomes was still utilizing, other weapons on this team and did a very good job of it. And offense boded well. But I think if you're Kansas City, when you get ready for that roster trim, you got to make sure you have the right 3 or 4 guys behind Rice, Hollywood, and Worthy. Because Mahomes is going to use a lot of those guys as well. I think Hollywood Brown is going to have a very good season. I do. But as of right this second, he's not a standout elite number 1 receiver. I think he will be, but he's not right now. And in case Hollywood Brown does not pan out the way we think he's going to pan out, you want to make sure you have good depth on this receiving room. I mean, by the way, to be clear, I think Hollywood's going to have a 1,000-yard season. Now, is he going to have a season like Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase? That I'm not 100% sure. I think he has that capability. I really do. This is the best situation Hollywood Brown's been in so far. I mean, who has his quarterbacks been? Lamar Jackson. And then a myriad of quarterbacks in Arizona. Robert mentions Luis Rees-Zammit may be used as a slot receiver. Maybe not early on, because I think when you make this transition from rugby to the NFL, the running back position is probably the best place he can be at. Because route running is, I mean, that's a whole different animal. Maybe over time, he can be used more of as a slot receiver. I don't think he'll be used early on, though, Robert. Not early on. Listen, when I was on vacation, so obviously the podcast was on hiatus for a couple of weeks. I was listening to Dave Tobe's press conference. He had a lot of great things to say about Luis Rees-Zammit. And this whole thing with the kickoff rule, this was a little bit of a surprise to me because I did not know the Chiefs were going in this direction. Although, I guess we should have seen it coming because we know Justin Reed capable as a kicker. But he's very clear that is not Harrison for kickoffs. And I think that is very smart. And listen, honestly, like, if Justin Reed is capable of doing a good job on kickoffs, I think that should have been the case even before this new kickoff rule, because kickers generally don't tackle. And when they're like the last line of defense, it's usually not good anyway, because they get blocked very easily and the returner goes all the way to the end zone. But if you're the Chiefs, you might want to consider Justin Reed or Luis Rees-Zammit, because those two guys are probably far better options, especially with these new rules for the kickoff game. And then Tobe also mentioned that LRZ is short for Luis Rees-Zammit. He's also one of the leading candidates for being a kick returner for the Chiefs. So, a lot of people were saying, oh, he's just there for show and that the Chiefs are doing this for PR or whatnot. I don't know what PR you'd need when you have Taylor Swift's boyfriend on the team. But, man, all the hype with LRZ so far in practices, he seems to be living up to the hype. Now, I think we still got to see him in preseason games when you go up against other teams. And that's when I think teams are going to have a better understanding of LRZ. But so far, he's definitely doing a lot of things that that I think we've all wanted to hear. Timothy says, KT or Hardman? I take Hardman, just my opinion. Yeah, I don't disagree, but I kind of just wonder, like, why is he available with that skill set that he has? Zammit would be perfect for screen passes. 100%. That is going to be huge. Like, you can line him up as a receiver too, and he doesn't. You're not route running on a screen pass there, so it's just quick pass and catch and take advantage of good blocking, hopefully. And he can definitely utilize that with his background in rugby. Justin says, I personally think they should just trash the entire Arts District and build a football stadium downtown, and it would be perfect. Okay. Where is the Arts District specifically? Let me look that up, because I can't say I'm actually familiar with the Arts District. Let me see if it comes up. Crossroads Arts District? I don't know if, listen, there's like a little bit of an area north of Crown Center that I think maybe could be utilized for something like that, Justin. Unless you're talking about a different part. Because it says here Crossroads Arts District. I've always called it the Crossroads. I don't hear a lot of people refer to it as the Arts District, though I've heard that in the past before. Listen, there's a lot of parking right there on 20th Street, between 20th and 22nd. That Union Station area, like just east of Union Station, there's a big parking lot there as well that could be utilized for sure. So I don't disagree there. They can use this to offer Butker less money because he's not doing kickoffs. Oh, that's a really interesting point. I've never thought of this. Butker is going to be a very expensive player next year. And listen, I know everyone has opinions about his speech and whatnot. Man, I'm telling you right now, you do not want a team with a different kicker, because when Harrison Butker got injured, those other kickers, Matthew Wright and Matt, the other Matt, I can't remember his name. Excuse me. They were not good. They were not good. And I know one of them like made a 63-yarder, which was a Chiefs franchise record. And then a week later, Butker broke it when he came back. But the things that Butker has done, like game-winning field goals in the AFC Championship game against the Bengals, and then the next game for Super Bowl 57, a game-winning field goal. Then I know it was a short field goal, but I mean, that pressure with that moment, like that's a thing, man. That's still a thing. And even that, I know a lot of people talk about how, oh, the Chiefs got that penalty from Joseph Osai. That still was not an easy kick to make in that AFC title game. And then in this past Super Bowl, he made the game tying field goal, which again, a lot of pressure and that whole situation there. Like those are not easy kicks to make in those situations. I don't care how close or how far you are. Those are not easy to make. So to me, I know Harrison Butker is going to be a very expensive kicker. And to your point, Timothy, about how he might be cheaper if he's not doing kickoffs. Boy, I don't know if that's going to work. I can still see Butker demanding a lot of money. Because at the end of the day, it's like, when you look at a kicker, what do you care about? His field goals. That's it. That's all you care about. As long as his kickoffs are not constantly going out of bounds, but even if he's not doing kickoffs, I mean, the type of season he just had, he only missed 2 kicks all year. One of them was with a maybe deflated ball, and the other one was very cold weather in a game where nothing was going right for the Chiefs on Christmas. So that's it. Those are the only 2 kicks he missed all year. He has the second highest field goal percentage in NFL history, right behind Justin Tucker. So, I don't know, man. Like that whole situation with Butker, he's going to be a very expensive kicker for sure. But I'm a little nervous. Robert says need a veteran running back to support Pacheco. Yeah, the running back room. That's a very good point. The running back room is not very big on Kansas City's end right now. You have Pacheco, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you have Deneric Prince, Keontae Ingram, Hassan Hall, Louis Rees-Zammit. Yeah, you don't have like a big crazy running back room there. And after seeing the Derrick Henry contract, I would not have been opposed if the Chiefs brought him in, honestly, with that price. Because I think that he would have been a great 1-2 duo with Pacheco. Would have been very similar to what you saw with Thomas Jones and Jamal Charles several years back when they led the NFL in rushing yards in 2010. Crazy enough, like Charles was second or third in the league in rushing, but was second on the team in carries, which I will never, ever understand that. But that's a topic for another time. Yeah, I don't know who the Chiefs would need. I think that's part of the reason why they signed Louis Rees-Zammit, because they might maybe utilize him more. Because I like Pacheco and everything he's done. And with defenses having to be prepared for all of the receivers and not being able to stack 8 or 9 in the box, yeah, that probably could be a good thing for Isaiah Pacheco and their other running backs in Kansas City, for sure. I'm very curious to see how the Chiefs utilize that. Been a Chiefs fan since 1990, and my dad's been a season ticket holder since the 80s. That's awesome. That is awesome, man. Good on you guys. You and your family have been around for a long time supporting the team. That's good to see. Teresa says, hey, saw a comment the other day, can't recall who or where, said Casey will not three-peat because we have a tackle issue. Well, okay, this is actually a very interesting topic here. So your left tackle in week 1 is probably going to be Kingsley Suamataia, because Wanya Morris was caught smoking marijuana, which, it's not the worst thing in the world, but that might translate to a 1-game suspension in the 2024 season. So Kingsley's probably going to be your week 1 starter, but I think he's going to be a good left tackle for the Chiefs. I really do. Jawan Taylor, let me just start with his pass blocking. I think there were times where his pass blocking was good, but then there were times where his pass blocking was bad. And so he's got to be more consistent about that for 2024 and beyond, because the Chiefs are paying him a shit ton of money. Now, as far as the penalties go, I mean, I don't understand that whole thing with how he was lined up, because he lined up like the exact same way in Jacksonville. If you guys have NFL Plus, go watch all of his games in Jacksonville in the condensed version. Go watch him in that playoff game against the Chiefs. Line up the same way. He did the exact same thing in the preseason. Lane Johnson does the same thing. In fact, the rules expert for Fox Sports, Dean Blandino, he even acknowledged that. So what Jawan Taylor was picked on with it, the way he lined up and everything, was weird to me. So I'm not really going to get on him because of the fact that he led the NFL in penalties, because that whole thing was weird. They actually, the Chiefs substituted, they took Jawan Taylor out and they put in Prince Tega Wonagu. And they told him to do the exact same thing, and he did in that Chicago game. And he wasn't flagged for it, which was weird. So, and listen, I was at the Detroit Chiefs game, so I did not hear the broadcasters. And so this was all a big shock to me. But the broadcasters and their rules expert, they went crazy about it. Yet the Lions sideline, they never said anything to the officials about it. They weren't going off. You usually see head coaches shout out refs when they miss things like that. But Dan Campbell didn't seem to have an issue with that all game long. So I think the Chiefs do have two solid offensive. Do I think they're great? No. I think they're better than what you had in years past with Andrew Wiley, Orlando Brown, Donovan Smith. Although I will say, I think Donovan Smith did step up in the playoffs. He did play better in the postseason for sure. And again, maybe that goes to the Chiefs resting their starters in week 18 and what that did. Do I think the Chiefs signed McKinnon? I think we've officially moved on from it. Never say never, because the last two off seasons, the Chiefs signed McKinnon after the draft. Last year, it was right after the draft, like 2 or 3 days after the draft. And then the year before, he signed with the team, I want to say in like late June or early July. But I think we're now at a point where, unfortunately, he might be done with the Chiefs. Unfortunately, he did not have a good season last year. He contributed to some of the drops as well. And just his production overall was not very good either. He did start, picking things up in that New England game, but then he got hurt and didn't play until the Super Bowl. Was a good key blocker in the Super Bowl, though, for the Chiefs, and had a couple of plays there he made. But I think the Chiefs have reached a point where they probably moved on from him. So I don't think he's going to be back, unfortunately, which I hate, because, man, I still remember what he did in 2022, where he just went off and won AFC Offensive Player of the Month. And then the Super Bowl, of course, everyone remembers him, sacrificing a touchdown in the Super Bowl for the betterment of the team. So I hope he's back, but I'm not banking on it. Okay, I do want to get to the last topic real quickly and talk about a comment CJ Stroud made. CJ Stroud was on a podcast called the $1 million worth of game podcast. That is the title of the podcast. I want to make sure I say it right. And on that podcast, he had a very interesting comment comparing Matthew Stafford to Aaron Rodgers. And he said that if Matthew Stafford had the same opportunities that Aaron Rodgers had, then Stafford would have more rings than Rodgers. Both, by the way, have one Super Bowl ring. Rodgers won fairly early in his career. Stafford has won it recently in the tail end of his career. Obviously, Stafford is a much better situation now in LA than he was in Detroit. Let's talk about Detroit versus Green Bay, because I think that's what CJ Stroud's referring to. What Stafford had to deal with in Detroit versus what Rodgers had to deal with in Green Bay. And I know there's a big deal about how Rodgers, they never drafted a wide receiver in the first round during Rodgers' time in Green Bay. But when you look at overall who Green Bay had, They had a lot of good players there. Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Ryan Grant, Donald Driver, Eddie Lacy. Some of those guys I mentioned have had success for a long period of time. Devontae Adams, another guy on that list. Some of those guys have had success for a long period of time. Some of them were only successful for a little bit, but you saw a lot of victories in Green Bay. I know, ultimately after the first Super Bowl that Green Bay won with Rodgers, they didn't win it. They haven't even been back to a Super Bowl. They've been very close, but have fallen short many times. But have still had all those opportunities. So yeah, I see Timothy in the comment mentioning Megatron. Yeah, they had Megatron, who, is way better than any player Green Bay has that I mentioned. But behind Megatron, who else did Detroit have? Like Golden Tate, Marvin Jones Jr., Reggie Bush, Nate Burleson, Brandon Pettigrew. Those guys weren't horrible, but they weren't key vital weapons to help you win a Super Bowl, let alone win a playoff game. Look at Detroit right now. That organization is in a far better place from top to bottom than they were 5 years ago when they had Stafford and couldn't get anything going. So to me, let me just say this. Okay, Justin has an interesting comment. He kind of stealing my thunder here. Justin says the defense Stafford had in Detroit was horrible, though it was like the 2018 horrible defense, the 2018 Chiefs. Here's my thing. CJ Stroud is right that Matthew Stafford probably would have taken better advantage of certain situations and might have more Super Bowl rings. But man, that's just the way things work out sometimes. We can't play this game of hypothetical fantasy football where, if he had this person and he was drafted in this situation, then this person would have more we can't play that game, man. Maybe we can play that game on Madden, literally play that scenario in Madden, but obviously that's not real life. I hear a lot of people criticize, maybe not criticize Mahomes, but take credit away from him by saying that, he got drafted to a perfect spot. Well, okay, yeah, but the Chiefs were not winning playoff games before Mahomes. They weren't. Travis Kelce set the single season record for receiving yards by a tight end not once, but twice, with Mahomes throwing the ball to him. Not Alex Smith, Mahomes. Tyreek Hill became the franchise single season leader in receiving yards with Mahomes throwing him the football. Not Alex Smith. Alex Smith never won a playoff game with Kelce and Tyreek Hill together. He did win a playoff game, but that was in 2015 when Tyreek Hill was not on the team. When they drafted Tyreek Hill, when you have, both Hill and Kelce, you should thrive and do a lot of great things. But Alex Smith never won a playoff game with that unit. Mahomes did. He won a Super Bowl and then more without Tyreek Hill. I had Dan Shanka on my podcast. Dan Shanka, who's a great guy, does a lot of great stuff with his website, ourlads.com. I'm sure you guys have seen their depth charts on there. I'm even using it right now for reference. He's a former Chief scout, also scouted for KU and several other NFL and college teams. He was on my podcast several years ago, and I asked him about Mahomes getting drafted into a great situation like Kansas City, and I asked him if he thinks there's anyone else that's been in that situation, and he says Aaron Rodgers. To CJ Stroud's point, yeah, Rodgers did get drafted to a great spot. Sat behind Brett Favre maybe longer than he wanted to, but once it was his time, man, he got going, and he definitely utilized what Green Bay had. And again, I know people make such a huge deal about Green Bay not drafting a wide receiver during the Aaron Rodgers era, but it's not like the Packers didn't have anybody. They had a lot of great players, and I mentioned all those guys already that stepped up and did a lot of great things with Rodgers in Green Bay. But again, I'll repeat, I've said this so many times in the past, especially with the Herm Edwards era. I felt like the Chiefs drafted very well in the Herm Edwards era. The problem is the coaching staff, they were not the right group to lead those young men. I know Herm Edwards was so big on a youth movement, and I think the Chiefs got some very talented players during those years. But the coaching staff, that leadership was not a good one to lead those players. Sometimes you have players that are talented coming out of college and they get drafted into really shitty situations. And, there aren't often times where I feel bad for an athlete, but I did feel bad for what Stafford dealt with in Detroit. I feel like he gave Detroit everything he had and they could not succeed. And I don't think it was his fault. He did everything he could have done. He hardly had help around him. That organization failed him. He goes to the Rams. The Rams have all kinds of weapons there. And that's why I think the Rams are going to be great once again because of who they have now. I know people make a big deal. Oh, Mahomes has all these fast players. Burrow has all these receivers. Well, yeah, you need good receivers to succeed. Even Tom Brady, he needed some viable weapons to be able to thrive. I mean, look at him going to Tampa Bay. He had Mike Evans, who was already there. Antonio Brown followed him there. Gronk followed him there. I mean, every elite quarterback has great players. Peyton Manning, during his time in Indianapolis, had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Reggie Wayne, two standout wide receivers who would start on any other NFL team during that time, with the exception of maybe one other team. So, look, the whole thing with, if this person was drafted in a better spot or had the same opportunity, man, we just can't play that game. I mean, we could, but what is that good for? Pretend football, hypothetical situations, Madden scenarios. Like, that's all you can really do at the end of the day. Unfortunately for Stafford, he didn't have a great career in Detroit. Not to his fault. But at the end of the day, he got himself a ring. And whenever he retires, whenever that's going to be, he can at least go off into the sunset with a Super Bowl ring on his finger, knowing that he at least did that at least once. Again, man, like, there are a lot of talented players who just go to really bad situations on other teams, and there's nothing that can be done about it. Sometimes, at the end of the day, a lot of these players are making a lot of money, so boo-hoo, like, too bad. That's life sometimes for you. It's the way it all pans out at the end of the day. Nothing you can really do about it. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Took a bit of a break, came back. We are now back. We'll be going pretty strong until the end of June. I'll take a couple of weeks off for late June and the 4th of July week. So definitely very excited about that. But in the meantime, the Chiefs will have media availability tomorrow. I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about tomorrow on social media. We will have a Red Friday live chat this Friday, so tune into that. I don't know exactly when the Red Friday live chat is going to be. Probably, early evening like we usually do. So be sure you come prepared with some questions on that. One other thing I did forget to mention. I know a lot of you guys have been asking about the giveaway. We will do a Facebook giveaway, a Xavier Worthy jersey. I will say this. Facebook has very strict rules when it comes to giveaways. So I'm trying to work around. I actually know what I'm going to do, but in terms of trying to track down how to pick the winner, that I need to make sure I have it done. I have it down so it can be done right. So just be aware of that. So it is happening. The giveaway will absolutely happen. Worst case scenario, I might just do like a live giveaway like I have done before. But for those, I've had some people ask, where's the giveaway? Because I did promise it this week. It's coming. Please bear with me. I just want to get some of the nitty gritty of the stuff down and make sure we're abiding by the rules. So that's why there's a delay there. Just wanted to make sure I had that, but I'm hoping to start it within the next 7 days. So please bear with me on that. All right. That'll do it for this edition of the Chiefs Zone podcast. I am Farzin Vasugian. Thank you all for downloading and listening to the podcast. Appreciate everyone who watched live on Facebook and YouTube. I'm out. I will talk to you all later. Take care.